All right, short reviews for February 9th. So I would say that I'm running out of things to write about in terms of February. I think I probably took on too many short reviews earlier, and that means some of these aren't going to be amazing. So uh, I never mean any offense when I say I don't like something. Of course, these are all entirely subjective observations, and you can take them with a grain of salt because I don't like goddamn everything, you know? Um, so And a good example of that is like I like everything that Traumalizer, the Finnish death metal band from folks and black metal bands that I actually do like quite a bit. I think Maras and Memoriam are quite good in kind of the melodic range. And uh, but this is a death metal band. They go for kind of a nuclear HM2 guitar tone, and lately I just don't want to listen to that. I just don't like that guitar tone. I think it mushes out the riffs, and it wrecks my ability to sit there with this album more than once in a sitting. And it's a very simple, superficial observation on my part, but I couldn't sit down and listen to this 20 times because it just sounded kind of ragged. But otherwise, you can tell these guys are influenced by Death Thrash and have a clear style otherwise. I like the way the vocalist approaches in more of a hardcore-ish kind of way, not metalcore, but hardcore. And they throw in a really deep cut cover here from the distant history of Finnish thrash. It's a pretty cool thing to include in there. So uh, check out a clip right here. All right, Last Legion is a Swedish death thrash metal band with some light black thrash metal influences, and this is, I think, their debut full length. That could be wrong. And the first song is pretty good. It's got kind of a bolt thrower sort of melodicism to it. I was really into that, and I ready to keep going. The next song was just kind of mediocre and plodding, and everything just kind of flops from there for me. It's kind of a groove metal record. It's a little bit sleepy, and there's a sort of like 90s Sodom kind of sound that's slow, and um, they're doing a lot, but it's just not producing much out of me. So I couldn't get very far with it, but I appreciated the opening moment of the record. I just feel like every part of this record, from the cover to the production to all that, needed another pass and just more riffs, you know. But otherwise, I don't think that, it's not like it was a terrible record. I just can't recommend it for my own taste. Man Must Die is a Glasgow, Scotland-based technical death metal band. Although we could accuse them of being a little bit melodic death metal, a little bit death grind, and a little bit alternative metal even sometimes. And it's an interesting prospect because you could easily compare them to like a dying fetus back in the day, decapitated now. They've got a little bit of like the way Psychroptic has a little bit of Meshuggah in the periphery, so do these guys. So there's a well-rounded idea here for their sound, which is maybe considered technical more for how much that it tries to do and how much it does well, and melding all those things together. Uh, it is a little bit accessible, pretty easy to step into, and it's not like it was bad at all. I think there was one song in here that I just want. The title track is just not really my thing, but there are some pretty good songs on here with some. They've always had like a little bit of hardcore punk influence in some of their songs, so um, I don't think I have a clip of that yet, but we'll listen to that if we can. Owl's Geomancy is a kind of a progressive rock band, a little bit of a desert rock band, a little bit of a heavy metal band, kind of maybe proto metal or stoner metal, and this is a chilled out sort of rock opera, progressive rock record, kind of something that a fan of King Gizzard will understand in its sort of jammed feeling, and the surprising bits of personality we get as the psychedelic rock side of the band comes out a little bit more, and their their bassist is pretty interesting on this record. He throws out a lot of sort of classic early 80s metal feeling to some of these songs, even though it doesn't quite fit, it still ends up being cool. uh, yeah, this is a pretty interesting one. I don't know if you have an hour's worth of patience for something that you're just not really going to figure out on the first run. This will be worth sticking with. I think the first time I approached it, I was like, oh, what's going on? But the second time I went through it, I appreciated the hills and valleys that they serve, and the impressive amount of ground they cover. They're onto something pretty interesting here. I think it could be even more organic, or it could be a little bit more buttoned up, and whatever they can do to amplify the personality available to the band would make it pretty interesting. So it's a pretty good start from this band. I think this is their debut. Coffin Born is a Hungarian death metal trio with members of bands that I like quite a bit. I think Rothatus and Cryptworm are on a lot of people's radar after the last couple of years. And this band has been around since I think 2008 or 2013. They put out an EP in 2014, and very straightforward old school death metal in the style of like Master, Asphyx, and Grave, and straightforward riff style, very simple production values, not particularly stylized. It's just straightforward. You'll get it right away. Very steady playlist all the way through. Check out one of the songs. Wretched Fate is another Swedish death metal band, and another one that leans towards a little bit of the bloodbath kind of style. And that's generally just saying that it's a throwback record dominated by a certain guitar style, and maybe a simplification of what kind of made those classic bands interesting. And this time around, this is our second full-length album, is a little bit more melodic. Melodic in the sense that a band like Revel in Flesh is melodic, which is very much related to where Dismember went with their discography. This time around, they're still a Boss HM2 death metal kind of band, but they've incorporated much more frequent lead guitar parts and a lot of interesting atmosphere throughout. It's a very dense, sort of half an hour death metal record, and if it wasn't for the guitar sound, I'd probably be a little bit more into it. But it just sort of crunches around in a way that I'm just not into lately. I appreciate it sparingly. It was something I was really into in the 90s, but it's been overdone. And not in terms of the style here. It's fairly straightforward death metal here, and I'm not really criticizing that. I think that's pretty strong, and they've got most of their gig buttoned down. Otherwise, as far as I'm concerned. Definitely check out the song Utterance from the Inhuman Tongue. It's an obvious standout. Festerday is a Japanese gore grind band. And now, what do I mean by gore grind? Definitely, I mean the 80s and early 90s style, which is heavily still inflicted with death metal, Carcass influence, Autopsy, and we could name 100 bands you may or may not have heard of, but consider this a good complement to what you might like about earlier pharmacist records, or anything from Blood that you've heard prior to like 1998 or 1999 or so, which involves pitch shifted vocals that are just kind of down tuned and guttural. And if you liked that Sequestrum record from a couple of weeks ago, this is probably a little bit better, and it leans away from the sort of death and roll side of things. So I really appreciated that this band has riffs, and not only that, but they have sort of a death doom side to what they do, which I thought was pretty cool. So definitely worth checking out. And well, you'll see, what I mean by gore grind when I hit play on the clip. Now, if you'll recall, I'm a big fan of Heavy Feather. I appreciated their second full-length album quite a bit, and it turns out that vocalist used to be one of the main vocalists for Sienna Root, another Stockholm, Sweden-based heavy psychedelic rock slash folk rock band. And this is their umpteenth record. They put out quite a few records from the early 90s, and they haven't always had they've always switched up the lead vocalist, and for the last several, they've focused on female vocalists who are of the sort of blues rock persuasion. So I think that Zubaida Solid is a fantastic vocalist and kind of the star of this more laid back, kind of loungy feeling record. And now they kick up into heavier rock here and there, but that's not really the focus of this record. It just sort of gives you a little bit of energy up front for the opener, and No Peace kind of has more of a rock vibe to it. But most of this is very chilled out. A lot of flutes, it's that kind of record, and that won't be for everyone. So I'll try to give you a more exemplar piece of a clip so you can figure out exactly what this is. I will always carry you. Ice Storm is a Catalan melodic death metal band who are definitely in the style of Amon Amarth, and more of the sort of classic records that touch a little bit more on power metal, and they don't fully go quite as operatic as like a Wolf Chant does, or a Turisaz or something like that, but they definitely get into a more narrative epic feeling, while also, strangely enough, pulling in sort of groove metal influenced moshable parts, which people have called metalcore, but not on this record. This is more just a melodic death metal record in a certain style, and one where I think they've really excelled at selling this theme to me of the Crusades in the North, and definitely dealing with Teutonic invasions and as it says, Northern Crusades. So a lot of really interesting history in there. The lyrics are pretty cool, and the theme is really cool. But I feel like the riffs aren't there for me. So I wanted to be there with it, but I couldn't get all the way into it because they like stuff like Lamb of God, and that's just not something I'm ever going to pick up and listen to. So. And finally, Host is a pretty interesting project from Greg McIntosh and Nick Holmes of Paradise Lost. And, well, if you know anything about Paradise Lost, you know that Host refers to their 1999 album Host, which was a very distinct shift, kind of a one-off, if you will, where they focused more on accessible electronic rock. Maybe we could even not say rock, we could say pop in a lot of ways. But it was somber, it was sort of gothic, and pretty interesting. It's endlessly compared to Depeche Mode. Some people love it. Most metal fans hated it. And this is a reprisal of it that is a little bit modernized. It's very focused on creating a certain feeling for the first half of the record, and they don't want to move out of that mode, that serious, slow, sort of slow epic that they work up there, and they are reproducing a certain era of electronic pop music, and their influences, which are um, they've detailed quite a bit over the years in Paradise Lost. If you follow interviews with them and their own tastes in this kind of thing. So the real question is like, is this a continuation of the host style? Is it kind of? I see it as a spiritual succession of it, even though these songs are arranged differently. They're similarly long, similarly drawn out, but I feel like they went more places on host, and not all those places worked. And here they're much more conservative with the electronic music influences they weave in. Sometimes this is really interesting. Other times it seems like, well, maybe this is just one of the best ideas out of 20 that they slotted in. And the second half of the record, where there's a little bit more of the electronic rock influences, gets somewhere, and it gets somewhere interesting eventually. For me, it just takes so long to get there that I wanted to recommend this record a lot more, because I think this is an interesting idea they've never explored very fully. Um, but it's not fully there for me. It's kind of a moderate recommendation. So uh, if that's even remotely your thing, which it is usually not for a lot of metal fans, check